In a 2-week preseason camp for Syracuse football that has been littered with national storylines and conference realignment and the ACC's expansion, we have a story that now directly impacts Syracuse football in preseason camp and brings us back to the 315 as the Orange add a late transfer. Myles Farmer, a former Power Five starting safety, joins the Orange midway through preseason camp. We break it all down on your Locked On Syracuse Monday. Let's get right after it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome into your Locked On Syracuse Monday episode. I'm Owen Valentine saying thank you so much for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today and every day. We're free and available where you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/locked on. College terms and conditions apply. It's your Locked On Syracuse Monday. Hope everybody had a good weekend and enjoyed some time relaxing, did their thing, had some fun. We are back in the Syracuse football swing. Got some news yesterday, courtesy of Mike McAllister over at Sports Illustrated for Syracuse. Does incredible stuff. Check him out, read his work. Really good insight on everything that you could need for Syracuse football in this preseason. But he drops the bomb yesterday that Syracuse, 2 weeks into preseason camp, has a late addition via the transfer portal, and that is the former Nebraska starting safety, Myles Farmer. Now, it is important to note that Syracuse and Nebraska have had a gigantic linkage this entire offseason. Obviously, things start. Syracuse loses its defensive coordinator, Tony White. He goes to Nebraska, part of a regime change over there as Matt Rule takes over, brings in Tony White as their new DC. That's sort of the start of this linkage. And it was talked about a little bit on Twitter yesterday. It was talked about when it happened without question. Does Tony White's departure indicate a pipeline of current Syracuse defensive players that are looking for a new spot or really like Tony White making their way to Nebraska? And that hasn't been the case, but this linkage has occurred. Syracuse obviously losing key defensive players, right? Deuce Chestnut, Jihad Carter are going to be your two big names that you continue to look at. One lands at Ohio State, one lands at LSU. But the real pipeline, since Tony White has taken over as the DC at Nebraska, has been from Nebraska to Syracuse, as this now marks the third defensive player to make their way to Central New York since Tony White's landing in Nebraska. That's Jalil Martin, it's Jaden Gould, and now Myles Farmer. Myles Farmer, big-time player. Started 11 games for Nebraska last season. I believe he started 4 games the year prior. He comes as a grad transfer technically with 2 years of eligibility left, which is important, which is big, which means you've got a little bit of consistency with this guy as he gets a little bit of time to acclimate, move forward, and then a year 2 as well, which I think is important and a big deal with regards to this happening. Guy that was the second leading tackler on Nebraska last season. Very solid player. I believe he had 4 PBUs, an interception, maybe a fumble recovery as well. Solid player, without question. Does a lot of good things on the football field. I want to point this out. Midway through preseason camp, he joins the program. 3-3-5, very, very different defense under Rocky Long. How quickly can you grasp onto that? You got way more going on with the rover and mix, things of that nature. How can you slot in immediately and get that system under your belt. Get the understanding needed to come in and play from day one. Can he do it? Yeah, I'm sure. But it's by no means the easiest thing. You're 2 weeks behind the eight ball in terms of preseason camp. You're 3-4 years behind the eight ball in some of these defensive backs in Syracuse's system with regards to the 3-3-5. You've got to pick this up quickly, and you have to develop a very advanced understanding of this defense really, really rapidly, which is a concern that I have in terms of the immediate. Not the long term. I think he can pick it up. I think he can do whatever, but you got to have that. And good news for him, right? He's got two guys that he already knows in this unit, and you can work off of them, specifically Jake Gould, who can easily be worked off of in terms of having these conversations, being able to chat about these things and what you're looking for and some of the different intricacies that maybe you're not as sure about. Jaleel Martin as well, more specifically in the safety unit as Gould, I believe, would slot in at the corner. You got two guys that you've played with. You did the most playing of the three, but now you've sort of got that interesting role reversal, right? You would assume that as a third or fourth year guy at Nebraska, Farmer was the one with the knowledge. Farmer was the one who knew the system. Farmer knew what was going on. He was getting most of the snaps, right? Perennial starter, starting 11 of 12 games last season, doing his thing, successfully playing. You would assume that for Jaleel Martin, for Jalen Gould, they're asking him questions. He is more of the teacher. Now you flip flop, right? Martin and Gould have that leg up in terms of understanding, in terms of knowledge, in terms of time spent on this system. Now you've got that. Now I have to mention it because it is important with regards to why Myles Farmer is here. And I don't like dwelling on this, but we will. Myles Farmer is here because of a week one of preseason camp and early August announcement from Matt Rule that Farmer would be suspended indefinitely for violation of team rules. What that violation was, we don't know. But he's suspended indefinitely for violation of team rules, in which he immediately enters the portal. Syracuse, per Mike McAllister, immediately reaches out. They have a pretty quick linkage, rekindling a conversation I believe they had in his initial recruiting cycle, things like that. Makes his way to Syracuse. What is the violation? We don't know. Could it be huge? Sure. Could it be something small? Yeah. It's a second suspension, though. And that's where you have to consider things. And you have to take a step back and understand what's going on here. In the spring, or he was last year, suspended for a game on suspected DUI. He apparently was pulled over, blew a .123 above the legal limit, suspended a game for a suspected DUI. That's two instances. And I will say that it is an interesting thing to see that Syracuse is eager to grab him. And I get it as a football program, but we just had this whole ordeal with LeQuint Allen and how we're going to stand on our moral high grounds and this happens and you shouldn't do this. And they backtrack on that. And now here it is. Here's a guy that's had a few issues. Oh, well, look the other way. I had to throw that out. Say what you want about that. I find it interesting. Farmer is a phenomenal player. He has a tremendous on-field upside. But there are some concerns, right? 2 suspensions in a year. It's a little questionable. And you wonder how this impacts a unit 2 weeks into camp. Let's take a quick break. We'll continue that conversation on the other side because I think it's something that 1,000% has to be talked about. But right now, let's chat a little bit about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire, it can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. You just go on, you add your job, you add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They're simple tools like screening questions. They make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. We're talking about it right now. A new individual comes to the Syracuse football program. What conversations did you have? What screening did you do? What did you look at before making that decision? It's phenomenal. That's what LinkedIn Jobs can do for you. They allow you to screen, and it's why businesses and small businesses specifically rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. Owen Valentine here on your Locked On Syracuse Monday episode, starting the week off with some big news. And Myles Farmer, big time player, huge upside, a ton of on field talent, can join Syracuse's safety room and find some success. The second leading tackler for Nebraska last season, some coaching change, some issues, some violations of team rules. He enters the portal, makes his way to Syracuse, and that's where we land now. He has 2 years left. And I just want to talk about this a little bit because I am interested to see, how the team reacts to this and how the group reacts. And we probably won't really get info on it, right? Syracuse, as we know, as I talk about, is very closed off in terms of interviewing people and players. And you get some guys, and Dino is going to tell you that how many people are letting media come into practice as much as we are. They're very sampled sessions, right? But either way, we're not going to get this information by any means, barring something huge happening. But I'm curious to see how the late addition of Myles Farmer impacts a group that's been working together all summer for 2 weeks in preseason camp, has been grinding, has been working at this, has been growing together as a unit. We were talking about, you listen to Elijah Clark interviews last week and conversations, and him picking up other players and shouting guys out, and that group and what they're starting to build. Throwing another player into that mix at this point, a guy who is a Power 5 starter, a Power 5 playmaker, going into a safety room and a safety group with 3 returning starters. How does that impact the guys? How does that impact mentality? And are you walking in that room where everyone's greeting you with open arms, or is there a little bit of, what's going on here? Like, I want my spot. We got our 3 starters right now. What's going on with you? And that dynamic is something that I'm a little bit intrigued with. If you ever watch a show, Friday Night Lights, it sort of strikes me, not exactly because he wasn't the best guy in the world, but Voodoo Tatum, when he comes in and they bring him into Dillon as the guy that can be the starter over Matt Saracen, and it sort of just threw a wrench into the system. The team that people knew, the group that you understood, the relationships built. This late addition, how does it impact things? I will say on the bright side, it helps to have the linkages already, right? 2 guys, as we mentioned, in the defensive backs group that played with Farmer last season at Nebraska. Helps to ease that in. But I will say this throws a shakeup in the DB room, specifically with the safeties. And that's what we look at for the remainder of the episode. I talked about it. Syracuse with 3 returning starters at safety. You've got Elijah Clark, who had a phenomenal season last year. If you remember our former host, Matt Bonaparte, huge Elijah Clark fan. Cinco, we're big fans of him on the pod here. You got Justin Barron, another guy in that starting mix, consistently in that starting mix that you liked, and you had him in there, and you liked what you saw from him. And then you go with Jason Simmons, and Jason Simmons, a starter more so in quotes. He and Jihad Carter, who is now with Ohio State, if you remember, were often listed with that or on the depth chart, right? Jihad Carter or Jason Simmons on the depth chart. So you've got all 3 of your safety positions in terms of your rover, in terms of your boundary safety, in terms of your free safety. You have a starter returning at all three of those spots. And now you bring in a guy who's also started 15 games, who's been successful, who can do a lot in terms of impact on the field, joining into that mix. Now, I will be honest, I have not watched a ton of Myles Farmer tape by any means. I don't know necessarily where he will best slot in this 3-3-5. Would he be in the rover? Would he be as a boundary safety, a free safety? Where is he going to find himself in this mix here? I don't exactly know. But it will be interesting to see, where his name falls on the depth chart when we first get one. Is he a guy who can come in and steal a starting spot? Yeah, he is. He's that caliber of player without question. Will he come in and 2 weeks late to preseason and trying to acclimate to this system and understand what's going on with the 3-3-5, find immediate success enough to be a day one starter when Colgate makes their way to the Dome? I don't know. We got some questions. If I were to guess, I would assume that. How far out are we from? We're 3 weeks from football, right? Am I correct in that? We're 3 weeks from Syracuse football, or is it 4 weeks? Let me check quickly because my dates are wrong. But if we're 3 weeks from Syracuse football, Syracuse kicks off September. Oh, what's that first Friday? September 2nd, or the first Saturday, September 2nd. So you are now 3 weeks away from Syracuse football. Can you, Myles Farmer, in 3 weeks, learn the 3-3-5 to a point and to an understanding where you can slot into this exact system, knowing your teammates, knowing your players, knowing the intricacies of what Rocky Long is doing? Can you do that to a point in 3 weeks where you can be a day one starter? My prediction is no. My prediction is that you go Elijah Clark, Justin Barron, Jason Simmons as your starting three safeties. Now, my other prediction would be that Myles Farmer starts 7 or 8 games this season. And I think both of those statements can undoubtedly be true. I believe that he probably won't be a day one starter. I could be wrong. 1000% could be wrong. My prediction is that he won't be a day one starter. But I think this is a guy that starts 6, 7, 8 or more games this season because of the caliber of player he is, because of what you've seen him do as a solid defensive option. And I think he provides, if nothing else, another layer of added depth for Syracuse. Right? You got Braylon Oliver in the mix in terms of added depth for your safety position. You've got Jaden Gould, who could play there, as well as probably, not Gould. Who else am I thinking? Oh boy. Cornell Perry's in the mix. I don't know if he's the answer as a redshirt freshman. You know what? Let me rephrase that. You got Armand Greenwood, who I'm not sold on. Matt Bonaparte, when he was here, was adamantly not sold on Armand Greenwood. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I think this is a massive depth piece when all is said and done. When you look at that situation, when you look at the unfortunate likelihood of Syracuse defensive players being injured over the past few seasons. Garrett Williams gets hurt last season. So many guys get hurt last season. Linton in the mix. Just injuries were the kryptonite to Syracuse's defense last season. And you could argue, what kind of season would they have had? Remember, they're 14th in the country at 6-0 heading into Clemson when the injuries really, really did start to pile up. They were 6.5-0 with a dominant lead at halftime against Clemson. And then they go on a 5-game skid that we won't talk about today. But that depth is going to be crucial. And Braylon Oliver can help, no question about it. I look at Jalil Martin, who we've been talking about, is going to be a big depth piece for this as a redshirt freshman transferring in. And now you look at Myles Farmer, who is going to give you that extra name, that extra probably starter caliber player, sort of the way, you saw Jahad Carter and Jason Simmons splitting time last season with the or next to their name on the depth chart for the boundary safety. I think that is what can help you a ton, especially if you can get a little diversity amongst positions, right? Some guys that can play both spots so that you can mix things up, have a healthy squad, and also have a little bit of depth as well, right? Sometimes you get some O-line questions this season, without question, right? Syracuse has had some instances where the offense can't get going and the defense spends a ton of time on the field. If you've watched Syracuse football, you have understood that sometimes they lose a game in the third and fourth quarter because the offense hasn't spent enough time on the field. The defense simply gets gassed. This, as an additional depth piece, whether he ends up as a starter or not, is going to be gigantic. Let's talk about it in the comments on YouTube. Let's talk about it over on Twitter at LO_Syracuse over there. What are your thoughts on Farmer? What are your thoughts on the situation, right? He, without question, comes with some, I don't want to say baggage. I don't think that's the right way to look at it. But you have to acknowledge there have been some issues in the past. And on day one of preseason camp at Nebraska, Matt Rule suspends him indefinitely for a violation of team rules, right? That is a factor. That is something that Myles Farmer brings with him to Syracuse. It is a fresh start. It is a new program. It is a new staff, but that still exists. How much of a factor is it? How can he slot into the safety group, right? Is it going to be a seamless transition? I would assume these guys will welcome him with open arms, but at the same time, right, you got a random guy that comes in a few weeks into camp that can steal a starting spot. It's a nerve-wracking thing. It is something that can allow people to rise to the occasion, and that's what you hope happens, right? Is this, sort of mix-up, shake-up, whatever, new face that is starter caliber joins the trio of returning starters. Does it start that competition that allows everyone to continue rising and continue pushing to get a little bit better? Or does it cause some issues? I don't know. I will say this, I saw on Twitter, Myles Farmer, the musician, little rap music saw. He's, making some beats for himself, rapping over the beats, got some good sound to him. So I think that in the long run, it's going to be a fun little team aspect of things to be able to have that, a fun little community, athletic department aspect of things to have, someone in your sideline, someone in your locker room, being able to have that fun, making music, understanding music like that. I think that's a cool little twist to throw in there. It's a big time player. He can do a lot of things, but how does it happen? It's a bit of a weird timing, very late without question, and an interesting circumstance to close things out. So let me know what your thoughts are on him. Do you think he's a day one starter? Is he a guy that's got to use a little bit more time? Am I missing a key piece to this that is essential to our understanding? Throw that in there. Join this conversation and let us know what you've got going. We got a fun week ahead. We should be, I know I teased this last Thursday for Friday and probably Friday for today, but we should be talking early this week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, about Syracuse basketball recruiting, some of the latest with regards to that, and some preseason stuff that we've been talking about, hearing. Let's say that, send some prayers, send what you can over to Maui. That is terrible. Obviously, Syracuse is supposed to play some basketball at some point there, but you look at that and then some terrible things happening over there. So I know our friend Neil Adler, hint, about what's happening in terms of Tuesday and Wednesday, and who might be joining us there, has been very adamant on Twitter, and rightfully so, about the disasters happening over there. So do what you can, keep them in your thoughts. We'll call it a day here on your Locked On Syracuse Monday. I'm Owen Valentine. So thank you so much for joining me, making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today and every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm OV saying thank you, peace, be kind today, make somebody smile, and have a good one. I will catch you tomorrow morning.